Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry, everybody, we're a little bit late, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. We're live and it's now working. So I'm going to count back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to Psychology 5.0. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the event, but firstly, I'd like to introduce my colleague who has created Psychology 5.0. So, Jazz, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, everyone. I'm director of the AI Coaching Alliance, and a lot of that work is looking at what's happening in industry and workforces with the rising use of new technologies like AI, but also looking at how we are evolving and developing employees while making sure that we're doing things in sustainable ways that respect the planet as well. We know AI use a lot of resources as does a lot of other technologies. So the question is, how do we go forwards improving human capabilities and well-being and workplace performance while just ensuring that we're looking after the planet in the process? And that involves actually recognizing if you're working with a whole new intelligence like artificial intelligence, you might need a whole new psychology. So that's what I've been working on for the last year or two.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to tell you the agenda. Firstly, just to remind you, I'm Michael. I'm a one-to-one NLP trainer. I work worldwide. I'm a Marshall Goldsmith stakeholder and leadership coach. And one of my claims to fame is if I look back over my clients over the past 25, 30 years, I have some really interesting people, and Jazz is one of them. And he's at the frontiers of this AI thing that I think is really, really interesting. So if I give you a bit of an introduction to the event, we're going to look at scene setting, which is some things like what is Psychology 5.0. We're then going to look at leadership and adaptations. How should leaders evolve their mindset? All this sort of thing. Who's going to be successful? Who may not be? We're then going to look at practical tips for an organization, and then we're going to sum it up. Now, the way we're going to do it is I'm going to do a short introduction to each session. We're then going to have a discussion. And I know from past experiences, these discussions can float into all sorts of interesting directions, because the reality is we are almost exploring the unknown. But at the end of the end of each section, we will bring it back to come up with hopefully some practical tips that we can all follow. So the first set of questions is scene setting, and we're going to be talking about what we mean by Psychology 5.0, what major psychological shifts are needed, and why is this conversation useful for all of us right now. And I'm going to start off with a small phrase, but I'm going to get Jazz to build on it and come up with something better. Okay. But my first thoughts is that Psychology 5.0 is around an upgraded human operating system, aligning emotional intelligence, ethical thinking, and adaptability with AI and digital systems. So it's really moving forward for psychology when us as humans sort of are communicating with AI and something else. Jazz, over to you.
Well, what you highlighted there about how human beings and new technologies like artificial intelligence work with each other, it kind of requires a new kind of psychology, because previously in the workplace, understanding people and how people shape one another's behaviors, that was kind of the job of various kinds of psychology. But we're no longer working in workplaces where we're just dealing with other people's intelligence. We're dealing with artificial forms of intelligence now, and we're relating to that in a way which is very different to relating with human beings and their intelligence. So traditional psychology, which might very well be suitable for something that's based on human-to-human exchanges, it might not necessarily be best to understand how human beings are going to be relating to artificial intelligence. And in the work that I've been doing around learning and development and coaching specifically, there's a big call for people to say we need new competencies, maybe we need new ethics to work with artificial intelligence. But I've realized that actually we may need to go back a further step and look at the underlying psychology beneath those competencies and ethics that we're working with, because we're not just working with people, we are looking at the intersections between people, ecosystems, technology ecosystems, and even ecosystems in nature, in the environment. So to understand how those three ecosystems work with each other, it's no good just having a people-based psychology. We also need to understand relationships with technology, especially intelligent technology, and how all of what we're doing between people and technology affects what's going on in the environment, because we know AI and other technologies make a huge impact on the environment in terms of use of water, carbon footprint, all those kind of things. So it requires a new kind of thinking and framing that previously, was not called for, because we didn't really have this three-way kind of interaction between people, intelligent technologies, and the environment. So it does require a reframe. It does require us to recognize that we need new principles, new perceptions, new models.
No, excellent. So just sorry, I'm in simple mode. So it's really being able to it's us humans, how we react with the environment, which always was important, but also how we react with the AI type stuff as it develops into super intelligence. And we've got to get these three relationships sweet, or we could end up in a bit of a mess.
Yeah. And it's something that, unlike previous advances in civilization that have happened in the last 300 years, that usually are linked to industrial revolutions, for example, this is the fifth major advance in human civilization over 300 years. And if it's advancing civilization, any advance in civilization usually ends up needing a new kind of psychology to make sense of things.
No. Okay, excellent. Next question: what major psychological shifts are needed? And again, I've got a phrase that I'll throw at you, but I quite like this. But you're the guy leading it. We must shift from control to adaptability, from linear to systems thinking, and from individual success to collective resilience. Now, whether people agree with that or don't agree with it, there's a lot there. So, Jazz, what's your reflection?
Well, previous technology advances or industrial revolutions, they've all been about control. More than anything, they've been about control. And the current industrial revolution that we're in, it's kind of forcing people to recognize that just being in control of things isn't enough for people to flourish, let alone actually have a planet which is also flourishing too. We need to look at how do we adapt to all the complex changes that are going on between people, between industry and technology, and also what's happening with the planet. That complexity is not necessarily something that can be controlled. It's something we need to adapt to. And more importantly, we need to exercise more skills that are related to collaboration. If you can't control things, then the next best thing you can do is learn how to collaborate with things in very refined and sophisticated ways. Humans need to learn to collaborate with technologies, and the same is true in reverse. The technologies need to collaborate, the AIs need to collaborate with human beings, but also between us and the technology infrastructures that are out there. We also need to work with the environment. We need to work with nature. That three-way collaboration is critical for the near future. It's critical for the fifth industrial revolution that we're now part of, Industry 5.0. So no, control used to be the previous industrial revolution's thing. It was about automation, it was about the Internet of Things, it was about remote control of things. But now we are in a world where control isn't making enough of a difference to where it's important. And people need to learn how to collaborate with each other more effectively. They need to learn how to collaborate with technology like AI more effectively. And probably most significantly, they need to learn how to collaborate with the environment, because they'll end up in a world which doesn't really support them surviving. So there's not much point in developing technologies if they're not even going to survive.
Okay, I get it. And the last one, which you sort of lead to, why is this conversation critical now? And again, as a teaser into it, where that without adaptation, leaders risk being burnt out, there being an erosion of trust, and a widening divide between those that can navigate complexity and those who cannot. And I quite like that navigate, because to me it's about something about navigating complexity and chaos. And those are key skills, whether we like it or not. But Jazz, your thoughts?
Yeah, complexity is linked to uncertainty, and
Yeah.
obviously uncertainty and complexity are factors that industry and business have been dealing with in the last few years. However, in the cultivation of new work practices that incorporate technologies like artificial intelligence, we're expecting more and more of human beings, and as a consequence of that, without the appropriate technological support for them, they're ending up doing way more than their job description, and it's resulting on unnecessary stress for them, which eventually causes strain, and somewhere down the line it leads to the kind of suffering that results in burnout and dropout. Now, AI has been brought in to kind of offload some of those tasks and duties, but a problem has emerged, which is that it was really meant to be brought in to prevent overloading. Unfortunately, people have started using it just for convenience purposes, and they've not really been using it to handle their overloading. Instead, what they're doing is they're offloading everything to AI, and they're offloading things for the basis, of convenience. And the consequence is that if they don't do critical thinking themselves, if they don't exercise conscience themselves, or their own curiosity, or the building of their relationships, and they hand everything over to AI, the consequence will be that things are going to start to atrophy in them, especially their relationships, their own critical thinking and curiosity. And this is going to have a cost on education in terms of schools and universities, but also education within businesses. It's going to lead to situations where more and more is done by AI, and it'll get smarter and smarter, but the human beings themselves will find themselves actually not exercising their mental muscles or their relationship muscles as well as they could do. And they'll find that those things will start to atrophy. We could end up in a world, if we're not careful, and that's why it's really important to look at what kind of psychology is needed to get through this particular age. We could end up with a world where machines are getting smarter and smarter, and humans are getting dumber and dumber. And we really don't want businesses or industries or societies or communities where we've got very advanced machines being controlled and run by humans that are very, very dumb. Ideally, we should be at least as smart as the artificial intelligence, and our humanity, more importantly, needs to be more advanced than what the AI is actually capable of, because the AI doesn't have humanity. It doesn't have lived experience. It's up to us to draw on our humanity to make sure that that AI is worked with in a way that cultivates human flourishing and empowerment. So this is very much the time for us to maybe come up with new psychological activities, principles, models to just identify how do we go about ensuring human beings don't just learn, but they also are able to cultivate their humanity, cultivate their associated collaboration and critical thinking faculties and skills as well. But it can't be done with the old psychology, because that was designed for human to human exchanging and learning, but not necessarily with an artificial intelligence. So we need to look at the dynamics human beings have with things like artificial intelligence and realize that that's going to require a whole new way of relating compared to how we previously just related with other human beings.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we've said enough to say that it's a useful subject to investigate. We're now going to bring it down to a little bit more practical stuff, although we will still float about a bit. So we're looking at leadership and adaptation, and we're going to ask the questions: how should leaders evolve their mindset? What traits will separate those who thrive which I think is a fascinating question, and how emotional intelligence, resilience, and focused are being redefined. We may disagree with those words, but I think there's something important in the meaning behind them. But Jazz, how should leaders evolve their mindset without preaching?
Well, you could do a typical scientific thing where we take a reductionist approach and we look at what's going on and we kind of reverse engineer things and break them down into little components and go, right, well, this is what drives everything. Let's change things and then improve what's going on, especially for leaders. However, I believe it's probably better not to try and look at what's going on in the world and reduce it into something. When you're in complex work environments, when you're in complex ecosystems where there are a lot of dynamics, trying to simplify things is often not necessarily a good idea. The complexity is often necessary in order for things to function as they do. And if you try and simplify things and then act based on your simplification, you'll probably find that your ability to manage those complex systems is nowhere near what it needs to be. So what is actually needed is, instead of trying to break things down, instead of taking a reductionist mindset to what's going on in the world, and these new dynamics, interactions that are happening between human beings, technology like AI and the environment, it's important to go back to first principles. And if you look at models of psychology which are not from the West, but have been around for thousands of years in places like Africa, India, China, places like that, especially indigenous traditions and ancestral forms of wisdom that come from those countries, they don't tend to break the universe down into smaller and smaller components. What they do is start from simple principles and they build up and expand outwards from those. So, for example, in China, there's the idea of yin and yang, this idea that links to things being polar opposites and how they work with each other in the world, complements. So dark and light, masculine and feminine, hot and cold, those kind of principles. And if you mix them together in various kind of ways, you'll end up building the world as we see it, including human behavior as well. And you see this kind of polarity-based way of looking at the world in many different cultures that have been around for thousands of years, that have their own wisdom traditions. But we're coming into a world now where those wisdom traditions that have kind of known how to work with nature, known how to work with human beings for thousands of years, they need to kind of be incorporated into the algorithms that are used in artificial intelligence and the operational kind of strategies that businesses use, because it turns out they're best to understand how to work and collaborate with complexity and new kinds of dynamics that exist between different kinds of intelligence, like human beings, and another kind of intelligence like artificial intelligence, for example. So that the mindsets are actually very, very simple. They tend to focus just really on three things. What is it that you are going to support and reinforce? As a leader, what is it that you need to challenge and stretch and change and make different, because it's in its existing form, it just isn't working, it's not the right thing anymore, it's reached its kind of expiry date in terms of its value. And thirdly, actually understanding how to create the right equity between those two things, the right proportion of support and challenge what you're actually trying to do. So in business, there are going to be things that you want to reinforce, there are going to be things that you want to change and make different, and then there are things that you probably just want to maintain and keep going. And AI can help us in identifying where we need support as human beings, where technology infrastructures and businesses need support, where they need to change and evolve, and also where they need to be sustained and maintained as well. So those three basic kind of drivers of support, challenge, and reflection, and maintenance and sustainability, these are the new drivers of this new age that we're coming into. But they're based on very ancient principles that have been around for thousands of years. And like I said, come from a lot of other non-Western cultures. But it's something that we're not really seeing in models to do with learning and development, in models to do with what's taught for coaches in their coaching psychology models. So there needs to be a recognition that the most populated places on the planet, Africa, India, China, why is it that their models of the world and of the mind and of productivity and performance that have been around for thousands of years, how come they're not included in the variety and diversity of psychological models that are taught to teachers, educators, coaches, L&D professionals, talent management people? It's time. It's time to include those traditions into Western forms of learning and training and skill development.
Okay, I'm going to bring it down to an answer AI gave me. Okay, but again, I quite like it because it's a little bit simplistic. It's slightly different to your view, but I think it's still worth thinking about. Prioritize curiosity over certainty. And again, the deepness of these are quite deep. Prioritize curiosity over certainty, delegate effectively, including to AI, and balance performance with recovery. If we're going through a period of chaos, we have to have time to recover and be bound and keep ourselves healthy.
Yeah.
I get you to sum up in the end, but unless you want to make an instant comment now.
No, sum up and then I'll reflect.
Yeah, so let's carry on. I think this is a fascinating one, and I'll throw my cliche first, then I'll get you to do it. What traits will separate those who thrive? Okay, again, and for me, agility, being able to change quickly, emotional self-regulation, emotional management, whatever word you have, because actually I prefer that to artificial intelligence. Resilient, and the ability to find meaning in ambiguity. Coming back to redefine our purpose and making some meaning in all this strange thing that's going on. But what do you think will separate those that thrive?
There's one thing that is not guaranteed or is something that you can really say exists in the universe, despite what people think, despite what AI will lead you to believe. There is no such thing as certainty. When you look at quantum physics or look at physics or the science of how the universe is at most fundamental levels, you'll see there's so much flux and chaos that uncertainty is a native feature of the universe. Yeah. And all you can have is less uncertainty or more uncertainty. And you can have one kind of uncertainty or a different kind of uncertainty, but there's no such thing as certainty. Relatively speaking, if you look at a couple of things and say, well, this is less uncertain than that, you might say, oh, well, there's uncertainty about that. But really, that's just another word for less uncertainty.
And I think there's something there because humans do not like uncertainty, and we tend to make up certainty, but it's an illusion.
And this is the problem with AI.
Yeah, it's how we cope with it, how we thrive.
Yeah, AI seeks to give everybody certainty and security in what they're being told. And unfortunately, it's nothing like the way the world of the universe actually is. Now, people need some sense of certainty in order for them to make decisions. But in order to learn the greatest lesson we need to in life, we can't necessarily learn those things from a book full of certain facts. We need to actually learn those things through lived experience, which is going to be something that's going to have more value for us because it's something that's personal and something that's happening in the real world. So this ability to work with the uncertainty of the real world through lived experience is something that artificial intelligence doesn't have. Its job with its algorithms is to deliver something that's going to provide certainty for you, or a variety of certainties. That's its job. Its job is to satisfy you and make you content. The last thing it wants to do is get uncertainty to you and provide you with less kind of security in what you know and what you're actually doing. So unfortunately, for the world that we're living in, AI can help clarify your lived experience and clarify what it is that you're beginning to understand through it, but it can't provide the understanding. It can't provide the lived experience. You as a human being still need to go through that. And the new psychologies that are needed are to help human beings see that. Look, before you go and look for certainty and get AI to help clarify what you're doing or what you're trying to achieve, maybe you should just get a grip on your own experience first, get some sort of understanding of it. And then when you've got that understanding of it and you've got an intention of something you want to do with that understanding, then go to AI, contain that intention into a prompt, and then see what it can do to advance how you're advancing yourself. That's the way things need to go.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So almost we have to redefine our own lives. Sorry, haven't quite got that. But there is something about, and I'm leaving this as a floating thought. We need to go back to deciding how we want to live our own lives, because we can't expect, just as we couldn't expect our bosses to do it for us, we can't expect AI to do it for us.
Cool. Now, AI, the final decisions, all decisions that are ever going to be made to do with people's lives, are not made by AIs, despite what some people think. AI will not replace your job. Someone who is going to make a decision on behalf of what AI has said and output, that person is going to lead you to not have your job anymore. Okay, so it's always a human being that makes these decisions at the end. And it's important to recognize that when we come to technologies like artificial intelligence, and for the kind of emerging industrial shifts that are going on, advances that are going on in business, we have to recognize one thing: AI is one technology amongst the whole ecosystem of technologies. And if you're someone who thinks, I'm going to be successful in business just using AI, then you are a bit naive, because that AI has to integrate, it has to interface with a lot of other technologies in a business, as well as people. And if you don't understand how to interface things, if you don't know how to manage interactions at the boundaries between your AI, other technologies, people, and their behaviors, then you won't even get your foot in through the door for those businesses. People look at you as being very naive. You have to have a systems thinking mindset in order to understand how to integrate AI into those existing organizational and business and community ecosystems. So linear thinking, just thinking that joining dots up in lines, that kind of stuff, it's not going to work in getting AI to be effectively coupled with other technologies and businesses, or the behaviors of human beings in teams, in groups and departments, things like that. You need to take a more systems-oriented kind of mindset. You need to look at things in terms of complex relationships. And it's more about what you all feel than what you will know. And this is a really important distinction between what you're going to do with AI and what you need to do with human beings. As human beings, we have lived experience. And through our lived experience, we develop common sense and wisdom. We develop a feel for things first before we develop a sense of knowing about things. AI does things the other way around. It has data and information and knowledge and intelligence, but yet it's not necessarily capable of generating wisdom that really connects to common sense and lived experience. So it's completely the reverse. So we do need to find ways of bringing those two sides together. How do we take how human beings learn and grow with the way that AIs gather data and knowledge and join it up into intelligent forms? There needs to be something which interfaces the two, human behaviors and AI behaviors. And this is where psychology for this fifth industrial revolution needs to come through. It needs to be able to help us understand the coupled behaviors of AI behaviors and human behaviors.
Okay, now I like this because, again, to me, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but at its simplest, it's that it processes stuff in different ways to us, so it complements the way we think. We process stuff in different ways, so it complements what the AI thinks. And if we can get us to work together, we will do some marvelous things.
It's very yin and yang, as I said. Yeah. If anybody's seen a yin yang symbol, they'll know there's this kind of S-shaped curve between the dark and the light areas. And many people think that's a dividing line, but actually it's a line of harmony. It's a line of equity and proportion. And it's a line where things are able to maintain life and energy in balance and proportion. It's the same thing with AI and technologies and human beings. There's a way of bringing their behaviors together where sometimes you need to use AI to clarify certain things and bring structure to things. Sometimes you need human intuition and critical thinking, curiosity, conscience to make choices about where to go. But the reality is it's always going to be a balancing act of equity, of attention and intention between what AI can bring to the table and what a human being and their lived experience can bring to the table. So that word equity is really important. We talk about equity and inclusion, diversity programs and things like that, but actually equity is really important in how AI works with human intelligence, because if you get the balance wrong, if it's too much AI and not enough human input, or too much human input and not enough AI structure, then you're going to find performance, productivity, empowerment, all these things, they're going to start going down, and that's not very useful for any business or industry.
Okay, that's brilliant. And that goes on to the last of the main sections, practical actions for organizations. As I said, it's very easy to float in the universe with all this stuff. So I'm going to ask 3 questions. What can organizations start doing today? What habits or frameworks build psychological agility? So we have the ability to change. And lastly, the fun question, what gives us hope for the future? So the first one, what can organizations start doing today? And the very short answer is build cultures of continual learning, because it will be change. We have to continually learn. Normalize mental health conversations, which I find quite interesting, and use AI as a co-pilot rather than a crutch. Which one wrote co-pilot? I'm not going to say that. Use AI as a co-creator rather than a crutch. Jazz.
Well, it links closely to Maria's question that's in the chat, where she's asking about, what's the difference between linear thinking and nonlinear thinking, system thinking, and so on. And it's to do with the dimensionality of what you're working with. You can be one-dimensional if you want in your thinking, or you can be someone who can join dots between different kinds of factors, or you can be multidimensional in your thinking. And in order for you to think in a multidimensional way, you also have to think about lots of different processes that are influencing each other, happening at the same time in parallel. And that way of trying to understand complex dynamics in organizations is not necessarily something that you'll understand by just joining 2 dots together. Sometimes you don't know if you're even joining up the right dots with linear thinking. You might need to step back a little bit and look at the dots from a broader perspective, and you might find out, oh, I don't even need to join the dots. I know what the picture is, if there's sufficient kind of dots that make up what's in front of you. But even when you have all the dots in the right place, if someone starts joining up the dots in the wrong order, then you might be building a picture, but you're not getting the picture until maybe the final dots are joined. There's ways of joining things together to make sense of things, such that if you start in the right places, it doesn't take much time before you begin to see what the whole picture is in all of its dimensions. So linear thinking is just about joining one dot to another, but systems or higher level forms of thinking are being able to see the picture that's emerging beyond the individual lines that you're joining between one thought or perspective or problem and another. So when you can start seeing things from that grand picture perspective, and it might not just be on a sheet of paper and be 2-dimensional or 1-dimensional, it might have several layers to it, several extensions. If you have the capability of appreciating those things, you'll discover soon enough that it's not something that you can really know. It's something you'll develop a feeling for first. And then through the feeling of all that complexity, you'll start to develop a sense of what it is that you can actually collaborate with, what it is that you can actually control. And when you can get that right balance of control and collaboration, then you'll probably know how to best use AI alongside of human intelligence. So the overall kind of I suppose, procedures or ways or processes that you go and work about with this very much center on complementary ways of thinking on small scales and large scales, thinking in different dimensional kind of frameworks, different numbers of factors. But the long and short of it is that you're going to find in the real world, the better you're able to handle uncertainty, and you're able to work with also necessary uncertainty, the more likely you are going to be able to not just cope with what's going on, but you'll actually be able to make something out of it, to advance yourself as a human being as well as people around you.
Okay, excellent. Let's move on, because I've got two more questions on this. What habits or frameworks build psychological agility? And some simple ideas: regular reflection, structured decision-making frameworks, deliberate exposure to diverse perspectives. And in a way, I can't help feeling as we go through this, we do come back to some basic principles, that if we focus on some basic principles, we'll actually get through all this well. But sorry, over to you, Jazz.
Well, the diversity element's really important. And one of the things I've said recently to leaders in organizations is we've known that AI is a problem in terms of bias and discrimination. And at the same time, people have been complaining that inclusion and diversity programs aren't really working in organizations. But when you look at why that might be appearing that way, you discover that human diversity, if it's not appropriately integrated into the diversity of things that are in organizations, and diversity doesn't just relate to people here, it relates to diversity of technologies, diversity of operations, diversity of policies, diversity of products and services. There's a lot of different kinds of diversities, in organizations. And people think diversity, they usually think diversity of people. But if you can effectively integrate diversity of people into the variety of diversities there is in an organization, then you'll probably find those diversity programs regarding people will actually start to work really well. And people feel like they belong, they feel like they're included, and they feel like they fit into that organization. So it requires not just a regular diversity kind of initiative. It requires a recognition that organizations are made up of a diversity of diversities. And when you take on that mindset, then you'll find that all your different ecosystems, the people ecosystems and all their diversity, the technology infrastructure and all the diversity of things in there, and also the external environment that all these things are ultimately interacting with, they're going to have some coherence with them, between them. And whenever there's coherence between different systems, you find energy tends to be conserved. And it means the processes and things there tend to be sustainable. And if they're sustainable, they get to grow. And if they get growth, which is sustainable, you actually get evolution. So everything's based on conservation of energy, but that requires different kinds of diversity to have coherence between them, between people, between technology and environmental ecosystems. So those two principles, understanding diversity of diversities and understanding the importance of coherence between them for conservation of energy, this is what's going to be critical for future workplaces.
Yeah. Okay. Let's have a positive question. Let's have a positive question and start to pull all the things we've talked about together. What gives hope for the future? And my starting point is crises. And I do think we are going to go through a crisis and chaos and all that sort of thing. Crises can become catalysts for reinvention. Tools like AI and neuroscience can help unlock creativity, collaboration, and well-being at scale. But we may have to go through it to get there. What's your take? What gives us hope? What gives you hope?
Well, the word that you use there, catalyst, I think is a really important factor to consider here. Whether it's technology, whether it's people, or whether it's some other kind of affordance, anything that fosters some kind of catalysis, some kind of catalyst activity in business or industry will change things from one form to another, and it won't lead to an excess use of energy or resources or things like that. The catalyst tends to remain unchanged when it transforms things. So the work that I've been doing recently with the UK government, one of the things that I've specified is that industry has a kind of cycle through which things catalyze. And the cycle consists of three parts. It consists of learning. It consists of taking what is people are learning and transferring what's been learned over to other people. And then those transferables, I call them, transferable skill, knowledge, data, information, that has to be transferred to other people through the skills that help people to transfer: collaboration, social and emotional intelligence, conscience, ethics, these kind of things. So what we need to recognize is that if we want to see people catalyze their behaviors, if we want to see workplace operations catalyze to ones that are more effective and more sustainable, then we need to look at three things. Learning is about helping people to learn in bite-sized pieces, maybe doing it together with others, taking that micro-learning and cultivating it through peer-to-peer learning with other people or other students, and then making it a continuous process. That's continuous learning, and try and do it in a way which actually lasts for the lifetime of a worker or a project. That's lifelong learning. All those different kinds of learning, they've got to have as an output something that's transferable to other people or other systems, even AIs. So transferable data or transferable skills, transferable knowledge, it's got to generate these transferables. And then you need skills that allow for those transferables to be shared and transferred and paid forward to other systems, other people, even AIs, for example. And that's where we need skills to do with collaboration. Even AIs, different AIs, need to collaborate with each other just as much as human beings need to collaborate with each other. So collaboration is a really important literacy, not just for human beings. It's going to have to be encoded into AI systems that all talk to each other, for example. So these three things: learning that generates transferable assets like data and knowledge and skills, and then that stuff gets paid forward and transferred to others and other systems through things like collaboration, processes or skills or literacy. These are the key kind of pillars of the psychology that's needed for the fifth industrial revolution, the psychology 5.0, as I called it.
Okay, that's cool. We're sort of coming to the end. What I'd like you to do is, in fact, I may go first this time. What I'd like you to do is come up literally with one or what are the top two key thoughts or ideas that you'd like to leave people with. So what are some? You can go first. I mean, if you got them off the top of your head, you go first.
Well, psychology 5.0 is psychology for, as I said, the fifth major advance in human civilization over the last 300 years. Its main benefit is going to be helping human beings and their intelligence work best with new kinds of intelligence that we're seeing with artificial intelligence. But it's going to be a virtuous process. If it's done right, human beings are going to advance artificial intelligence, and in turn, in a reciprocal way, we're going to see artificial intelligence advance humans, not just in their skills and knowledge. Hopefully, we're going to see it advance human flourishing and well-being, but especially their humanity that they have within them. If we do it right, we should see humanity as a whole advance, and we will have the greatest advance in human civilization for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Cool. That's a nice thought. I think the couple of thoughts that I had. Firstly, it's almost, and I say this too often, we're at a delightful choice point, but it's humans, us, not the technology, that has to make the decision. Are we going to make the very best of this or not? And that, I think, is a personal thing. It's a bit like our lives. We have to make that position as an individual. And I will go back to, I think, some of the things that you said, that if you go through history, if we're going through a period of chaos and opportunity, there are some basic disciplines that we can pick up, some 3 or 4 basic disciplines that we can pick up, that if we work on now, we will actually thrive in it much more easily than we think.
Yeah, one of the factors is this recognition that a lot of people are using the term human-centric as their approach to working with all of this stuff right now. And I've had to highlight the fact that, look, some humans are bad actors. So using human beings as the reference point, as the central point around which everything evolves in our development is probably not a good idea. We need to connect in to something deeper that unites us all. And as I've said, that is our humanity, the personal humanity that we carry within us. That includes the compassion and conscience that we carry, and also the shared humanity that we actually have. So I'm not a fan of human-centric approaches or AI-first approaches. I'm a fan of humanity, what I call humanity-centric approaches. If everything we do is humanity-centered, and that includes not just looking after human beings, but the way that we care for each other and all life on Earth, including, you know, what's on the rest of the planet. If we take that humanity-centric approach, then we've got the chance of having a future civilization and a future planet which is flourishing and is full of life and is highly, highly advanced in terms of how sophisticated it is in its operations.
No, okay. Thank you very much for that. Would you like to give people your contact details and anything you want to bring to their attention?
Yes, so a lot of the work that I'm doing is looking at how artificial intelligence could be used to coach future leaders in this particular area and cultivate human flourishing. And so you can find out more about the alliance that I'm director of, AI Coaching Alliance. You can see my name tag just by going to the AICoachingAlliance.com website. You also find all my future events and other things that I'm organizing and running on the page that's actually there. You'll find my LinkedIn profile link there as well. So just go to AICoachingAlliance.com and you'll find all that information about myself and the future events that I'll be putting out into the world.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm Michael. Thank you all for watching. Our next LinkedIn Live is going to be with Brandon, the CEO of Marshall Goldsmiths Coaching, and we're looking at hybrid coaching in this new world, because that's actually, sorry, not hybrid coaching, how you manage hybrid. So how you manage hybrid teams. Got there in the end, which is another thing that's fascinatingly changing with all the stuff we've been talking about. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. Thank you very much indeed, Jazz, for your input. So we're going to say goodbye. There will be a recording of this on the website, and we're going to have some very, very brief notes that we'll send out to anybody that has previously registered.
Thanks, everyone.